All right, we are ready to get started. Thank you again for everyone who just joined us. My name is Jeff Stillman. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Validately. We're really thrilled that you could join us for the Remote Moderated Testing and Reporting webinar. This is a joint webinar between Validately and Proto.io. So we're going to be discussing a couple things that'll hopefully be that'll hopefully be beneficial for everyone from designers to researchers within your team. We expect the webinar to last about an hour. The first 40 minutes or so, we're going to spend time working on the slides that we developed, tell you a little bit about how you do user research for each stage of prototyping from low, medium, and high fidelity prototypes. And then we'll spend the last 20 minutes or so asking questions. We're going to build up a list of questions throughout the webinar. And you can type your question in by looking on your GoToWebinar control panel, expanding that questions tab and typing in your questions. So we're going to be taking questions throughout the course of the webinar. We'll answer them all at the end. So just to give an introduction to my other two presenters today, we're going to start off with Juan Lopez. Juan is the VP of User Experience at Validately. Juan has over 8 years of experience in UX and product and really guides all of our user experience initiatives here at Validately. And we also have Todd Siegel, who is a product evangelist at Proto.io. Todd has over 12 years of experience in user-centered design, and both he and Juan are experts within user experience. They are really at the forefront of user experience at both of our companies, and they're both going to be very valuable here to give you some tips of the trade that they've used over the course of their career. So just to review a quick agenda before we get started, we're going to talk about the characteristics of low, medium, and high fidelity prototypes, what you look to add to each one of those, how it should look like, as well as examples. And then we're going to talk about how you test and do research during all of those various phases. We're going to do a mock user research session for the medium and high fidelity prototypes, so Juan could give you specific questions that you could be asking to make sure that you're achieving the getting the most amount of feedback and insights from each of those user research sessions to really make sure that we're building products that are based on customer feedback to make sure that they're going to be products that customers use and not just ideas that we have internally. So just to get started, we're going to turn it over to Todd, who's going to talk about some of the characteristics of a low fidelity prototype. On to you, Todd.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. And hello, everyone. My name is Todd Siegel. And so today, I'm going to start off by showing you a product concept that I came up with. And I was thinking of like what would be something so an interesting question to answer. And I was thinking of the possible, I live in San Francisco here, and like the possible range of excursions from, combining riding, getting on a train and riding a bike. Like what sort of range of excursions are possible? So I wanted to start off by doing some sketching. And so I sketched out some just sort of initial screens just to kind of go through the concept. I wanted to start really simple, kind of like an incomplete design as a low fidelity one should be, and sort of presented in a low tech format. And so just going to start it off with, a placeholder name, bike plus train, and I wanted to have enough content fidelity to just describe exactly what's going on versus like Lorem Ipsum, and like to see a range of day excursions with taking a train and riding a bike, and just basic outline of button, and then kind of the flow to setting a starting point from where you are, say San Francisco, from which you can see such excursions, and then imagining just a basic results screen that would have some photos and biking and train information, and potentially be able to sort of save it. And then another screen I'm imagining is like some detail of a map, maybe step by step, maybe a description, sort of some of the things I want to explore in some initial low fidelity testing, and then being able to save it, and then sort of naturally probably wanting to share it with friends. And yeah, and so that's sort of the initial screens of low fidelity that I wanted to test, and kind of leaving open enough to kind of invite people in who are seeing it to try to give some of their ideas as well. So Juan, do you want to talk about the testing of the low fidelity prototype?
Yes, I do, Todd.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for joining. My name is Juan Lopez, as Jeff mentioned. So I want to jump in here and now from a research perspective, a testing perspective, what you want to do during the low fidelity prototype phase. Todd just showed a great example of sketches and how you want to keep it high level. And excuse me, and you want to do kind of something similar on the research side. So because these screens are very early, there's not a lot of detail. One thing you want to do when you're testing this with your coworker, or you go to a coffee shop and bring some sketches and share it with someone, or if you recruit more formal users to test this with, you want to make sure your instructions are very clear and obvious. And that the reason for that is it's such a make-believe scenario where they're looking at these literally pen and paper sketches. You want to make sure you give them some structure, right? Because there's not enough structure on the sketches just yet. That really helps them provide you the type of feedback you need. Otherwise, for them to say, well, I can't read what that says, well, that doesn't really help anyone. So you want to be very clear about the instructions and the types of things you're asking for. Also, make sure you're presenting the prototype and in a way that it's clear to them, understanding the navigation or anything else they need to understand about the prototype. In this case, the sketch. Whether that's, as Todd just mentioned, let's say, for example, you live in San Francisco, right? You might not be in San Francisco, so your prototype or sketch might not make sense. So make sure that the test participant or anyone you're sharing this with is oriented and understands how to move through it and kind of the scenario. The lower the fidelity, you want to make sure you're basically jumping in and helping a little more, because it's really hard to put yourself in the shoes of someone trying to use a prototype when it's literally five sketches. And quickly, because it's so early in the process, as Todd mentioned, it's great to allow conversations to just go anywhere, or at least almost anywhere. If someone starts to talk to you about oh, well, I actually would like a skateboard and train, or a boat and train, ignore the poor examples, but I think you get the idea. You want to make sure that you're not stifling the conversation, and you want to make sure you're allowing additional ideas to come into play, because it's so early on in the prototyping phase. And then really quick, finally, realize that you're literally sketching, and so if someone has an idea after you ran a 20-minute session with someone getting some feedback, and there's a whole new idea that came to mind, just take another piece of paper, sketch out a new thing, and then start testing that new thing as well. The great thing about paper is that it's so quick, and you don't need to you don't need a computer, you don't need battery, you don't need Wi-Fi. You need your ideas, you need a piece of paper and a pad. So come up with a lot of ideas, and quickly as possible, and get them in front of more and more people. And those are really good ways to test and research during this early prototype phase.
Great. Thank you, Juan. And so now, based on the sort of initial feedback from the low fidelity testing of the core concept, then I want to move forward and create a medium fidelity prototype that essentially is has enough functionality, clickable areas, basic scrolling to sort of have the actual interaction flow, where that's kind of the core of what you're testing. You're testing now how our users are going to sort of navigate through the app, the interaction, and also enough fidelity of the actual content itself. Since this is, something that, learned in the low fidelity testing in terms of the concept, is with what kind of information to present to people about the trail. Should it have difficulty information, step-by-step map, and these are the sort of things to explore in terms of content fidelity itself. And so what we're going to do now is I used Proto.io to create this medium fidelity prototype. And so I was able to do all of the design and interaction right within the tool, as there's whole libraries of shapes and and icons, as well as a lot of different design capabilities, like the ability to mask photos. And so I was able to do that fully in the tool, and then ultimately later take it to high fidelity still in the same environment. So I can sort of do the sort of natural zigzagging within the same environment. And at first just sort of nail the basic interaction and flows before kind of going along the path of the refining the visual design and animation. And so now I'm going to kind of go through the sort of process of now testing it in Validately. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to escape from here and show you the Validately prototype, or the prototype from Proto.io that's now in Validately. Okay, Juan, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Todd. Yeah, so this medium fidelity prototype is it's a really a great opportunity to get this on a device and share this with, again, similar type of recruits, different test participants. But the later on in the cycle, the more focus we're going to get on the type of person that's probably going to use this app. So what Todd did was he created the prototype in Proto.io. He shared it within the Proto.io website to Validately. There's a Validately link that's created right in Proto.io. And then what I did is I created a moderated test. And so what you're seeing on the right side of the screen there, Bike plus Train there, that is the visual of what Todd as an observer is watching, or me as a moderator is observing, of Jeff, our test participant in this case, who just waved hi to everyone. He's going to be the test participant in this exercise. And and yeah, that's it. Okay, so Todd, if you can go to the next slide, please.
Sure.
Great. So Jeff and I are going to walk through a kind of scenario of what you would do with this sort of kind of medium fidelity prototype. So Jeff, thank you for joining today. I really appreciate your feedback and your time. This session is going to be recorded. Please let me know if that's a problem. And this would only be used for internal purposes, so you have no reason to worry. So let's get started here. So excuse me one second. So I understand that you have some interest in biking, specifically around the kind of San Francisco area. So I'm working on a new app that I'd like to get in front of some people and get some feedback on. So this is, if you heard about it from a friend, maybe said, hey, I found about this new app that lets you kind of find some trails around the area. And so you opened it up and this is what you saw. Why don't you tell me your kind of first impression of what you see?
Sure. So it looks like I could book a couple of day excursions that have a combination of a bike ride and a train ride. I see the main button here to say get going, which I would imagine takes me to the next screen, but I also looks like there are 2 additional screens here at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is then swipe to see what those 2 additional screens are, because maybe there's something that's more relevant to what I'm looking for than I see on this main page. All right. So it looks like here I'm going to see some of the starting locations, some of the additional information on the bike path. The get going button hasn't changed, so I would imagine that would take me to the same place. Just swipe one more time, and it looks like here is a way for me to save icon for my favorite excursion. I can also share with friends. I imagine that's either through maybe an SMS or some sort of a social widget. So seeing as that getting going button is all the same, that's probably what I would click next, just to do some of the excursions that you have planned.
All right, so yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that, and tell me when you get there if that's what you expected to see.
All right, so now it's asking for a starting point for a location. I'm guessing that means that you offer these excursions throughout the country, and it's going to say which is the most geographically relevant to me. So I would more likely than not enter my location name and tap on or zip code. So I'm tapping on that, and it doesn't look like I'm able to do that.
Oh, right, Jeff. So just remember, this is a prototype. This is not a fully functioning app. So there are going to be certain aspects of it that don't work. So in this case, the zip code doesn't work. But imagine as if you could type it in.
Sure.
And then what would you do after typing in your zip code?
After typing in my zip code, I would click on the C excursions button.
Okay, yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that?
Okay, so it looks like there's an example of a couple of the excursions that we have here. Here's the first one. I'd imagine the fully built out app, there would be an example picture here. I also see bike details and train details since it's a combination of the two.
Let me jump in. What kind of picture would you expect to see there, actually?
Either a marketing picture, something that was professionally taken, or perhaps maybe pictures from other people that went on this tour, photos that they've taken. I actually probably prefer that, photos that other people took on the tour, so I can get a real-life example of what that's going to look like rather than a professional marketing photo.
Okay, great. Yeah, so what else would you do here now that you saw the picture and you see the details?
Sure, so I try to scroll. There's no indication that I would need to scroll, so that may be worthwhile. Now that I scrolled, I saw that there was additional information below that top bar here. But I am going to scroll, so I guess this is excursion number 2. I'd imagine it would include a lot of the same information that's included in excursion number 1 up above. I'll scroll one more time, excursion number 3, and that looks like as far as I'm able to get. So I guess there's 3 excursions in the San Francisco area.
So
yeah.
So let me just quickly jump in. If you wanted to kind of save excursion 1 because it looked the most interesting of the 3, what would you do?
So I remember from the initial screen that I could tap on that heart icon. So I'd probably tap on this heart icon here, and that should take me to the next screen.
All right, great. Todd, if you can go back to full screen and we're done with that session real quick.
Excellent. Thanks, Juan.
I'll just do a quick recap of the kind of the things. I went through some of them, but I didn't go through all of them in this sample research session. So one thing you want to focus on at this point is the main flows. You're not worried about all the error cases and all this kind of edge cases of what's going on. But you want to focus on, like, even from the initial sketches, you saw what Todd had with like just the real main flows. You want to get that really solid, and this is a great opportunity to do that. Sorry about that, everyone. Jeff and I are in the same office, and we have some feedback. So, yeah, and so one other thing I hope you did notice is that I wasn't interjecting a lot. I was not trying to tell him what to do. If you noticed, easily 60–70% of the time he was doing the talking, maybe 80% of the time. And the point is, like, I'm here to listen to him and gather his feedback, not for me to present him and then and talk through the app, right? So that's a really big and important one. You want to make sure that you're listening as much as possible, always asking follow-up questions that get the participant to talk even more. And finally, or 2 more quick things. Remember to remain on topic. This is a little bit more narrow than the early stage with the low fidelity, but also don't force it. Like, there might be a small offshoot, a small tangent that really could still get you further information, but you don't want to, so you don't want to limit those. But at the same time, if the person starts talking about how much they hate the metro or whatever, ask, listen to it, have one question about it, try to make sure, but make sure to reel it back in, because you want to still focus on the prototype you're testing, and not worry about the bad train system somewhere. But you can see how there's always like something you might be able to learn from it, but you don't want to go too deep because that's not really what you're doing. And finally, at this point, it's still really early and you can still iterate very quickly. With Proto.io, you can go in and make changes in the web or on the web on the fly. There's a quick update button, and then whatever was shared as a link to Validately or anyone else using that Proto.io link, we'll see that update. And so, there's a quick example, you could have just spelled something wrong, right? Or the button label was completely confusing to the first 3 people you talked to. Go ahead and change the name right away and test that again. Again, from low to medium, you're getting a little, in terms of research, you're being able to iterate, but you want to wait till you get 2 or 3 people saying the same type of thing before you make some iterations, and then that kind of continues on at the high fidelity, which we'll talk about in a second. So that's it for me, Todd. Go ahead.
Great, thanks, Juan. And so now, based on the feedback from the medium fidelity testing through a few of those iterations, I'm going to take that and go back into the Proto.io environment and start to increase the fidelity, the visual fidelity, and other sort of dimensions of fidelity, content fidelity, to address some of the issues and some of the other questions that I, as a designer, want to answer. Because thinking back again, like I want to just try to get a sense of what information is really wanted is part of the initial browse, and then once you go into the detail, for example, and I want to be clear, make it sort of clear visually exactly where the buttons are, and show enough, start to show some animations and some overlay, start to get it, feel like an app, and start to introduce states. So when you actually tap on the heart button, it, let's say, turns green, and so it starts to sort of flesh out the various different fidelity dimensions, to start testing those parts as well once the core concept has been validated through the low, and the flows have been validated through the medium fidelity prototype. And so just to kind of show you the environment for that, and I'm just going to go into, so this is the Proto.io environment here. And within the same environment, I actually have both the medium fidelity prototype and the high fidelity prototype itself. And so I can just very easily make the changes and switch between them as I need to in testing through like an initial testing screen, for example, that the tester has. And as Juan was mentioning, once I'm ready to share, I can just go over to the share, and then within settings, there's this update button here. So any changes that you make, you can just hit update, and the link that the tester has will automatically be updated in a frictionless way. And over here in a user testing section is where the specific Validately link that Juan was talking about that is used in the Validately app itself. Okay, so now that I have sort of, in this environment, increased the fidelity, now ready to test it. So I'm going to hand it back off to you, Juan.
Great. Yeah, if we can go back to the slides. All right, so we're going to walk through another quick example of a session here with Jeff. Again, Jeff is on his iPhone using the Validately app, which has the Proto.io link directly embedded. So Jeff, you've seen this before. You might see some new things here. I just want to kind of go a little further and see, if what you think have changed. And this time, I really want you to just get to the point where you like learned enough information about any of the excursions that you previously saw to really make the decision, right? Because there's a little more detail here. Remember, this is still a prototype.
Sure. So right off the bat, I'm seeing that beautiful full-color image here on the very beginning. It gives me an idea of the scenery that I could probably look for in one of the excursions. I'm going to do the same thing that I did before, since I do see the 3 dots at the bottom that indicate to me that there's additional pages here on this front screen. So I'm just going to swipe to start with. All right. Looks like I could see set a starting location and see the results, which should include photos of the bike path as well as both the terrain and the biking details. So I imagine that I'm going to see some of the photos that people took. It doesn't look like a professional image. It looks like something that a user that one on the store probably took, so I'd love to see images like that. I also see the full details of the trip. That should give me an idea as far as geographically where I'm going to be traveling. So I'm going to swipe one more time to see that last screen. And here it tells me that I could save my favorite excursions and share with friends. I imagine that saving it includes that it uses that heart icon, and then sharing it with friends would be one of these 2 icons. So it looks like I have all the information I need here to start looking for tours that fit what I'm looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and click that Get Going button.
So one thing you mentioned there, feel free to hit the button,
Sure.
is you use the word tour, which is interesting because as you saw earlier, the app right now calls them excursions.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me just quickly. Is there a difference between those two words?
Yeah, I guess I was imagining a tour would be guided. I'm not sure if these are going to be guided excursions or not. If it said tour within the UI, I'd probably imagine that this is going to be something that includes another person, something that includes a guide, perhaps. If I was just looking at excursion, I'd say, okay, well, these are probably just recommended excursions that I could take. But seeing as this is something that I would book through this app, I'd imagine there's something more than just reserving dates and times.
Okay, great. Why don't you hit OK there, and then we'll keep going.
All right, great. So it looks like the starting point was automatically added to San Francisco, which really helps and saves a little bit of time there. I don't have to put in my location or zip code. If it's just able to use my location from right within my iPhone, it'll automatically fill that out. So the next step that I would do is to click on that See Excursions button. All right.
And let me just remind you, you're trying to really get all the details you can amongst the different excursions to see which one you want to kind of either save, share, or eventually go on.
Sure. So I'm going to look through the beginning part. So it looks like this is one of the first photos that I saw. Okay, so I just swiped on that photo just because I'm naturally used to doing that. I wasn't sure if I was going to see additional photos or not, but it looks like these are more photos that were taken from people that have been on this excursion in the past. I'm trying to swipe, so it only looks like there's 3 here. I would love to see some sort of indication as far as how many photos would be included in this loop. But it was really helpful just to get a sense of what exactly I'm going to be doing here. Before I scroll down.
So if you can, for court, okay, you found it. I was just about to find. I was just going to see how would you learn about more details about the specific excursion.
Sure. So I meant to actually swipe, and I just sort of ended up clicking on biking details, and it pulled up this map. I probably wouldn't have known instinctually just to click on that biking details. I know there is a color difference here between biking and train details, but I probably would like some sort of a learn more button or see a map here just to make sure that I really understand that clicking on that biking details is going to bring up this additional screen here.
Okay, interesting. Is this this trail map? Does this help you? Does this give you enough detail to say yes, this is something I want? Is this kind of just excess and actually I don't really care about the peaks and valleys? It's just what direction does this make you take on this path of like trying to figure out if you want to take this excursion or not?
Sure. I mean, this is definitely something that I'm gonna want to see ahead of booking it. I see that I can take a couple different routes here at the beginning. I also just like to know, what sort of effort this is put into. So maybe with biking details, I'd love to see, an estimated time on how long it would take me to complete this excursion before moving on to the train trip. I do like seeing the level of difficulty here. I'd maybe like to see that a little bit more built out, just so I could have an understanding of whether or not this is something that an amateur would be doing on a bike excursion, or whether this would be requiring an advanced level of biking experience before going through that.
All right, great. Jeffrey, thank you so much for your time.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Tana, you can go back to the full screen slides, please. Great. So I just try to do a quick recap of that session. You notice that I was trying to probe on the details that are actually in the app now. I was doing less asking about his interests in bike versus train versus bus versus whatever. At this high fidelity, we really want to focus on what's actually being built, and it's really important you do that. You really want to focus exactly what you're trying to learn on. It's also, like I mentioned in that first bullet, we're getting really close to building this thing, so you don't want to come back to your team and say, oh, actually, by the way, this is completely wrong, right? Between the low and medium fidelity prototype stages, you've been learning along the way, so at this point, you're really not trying to to reinvent the wheel. Of course, because this is an opportunity to insert new knowledge into your process, don't say, well, okay, by the way, I just tested 5 people and they all completely hate it. Maybe you need to do something about it. But do remember that the point of this is you're refining as you go. You're not really trying to reinvent at this point. So one other tip, it's hard to kind of fake this. I wrote herd the cats. The idea here is like, it's really easy, especially when there's something that's really high fidelity as shown here, for a test participant to really dive into the details and say like, oh, that green button, I really hate green, right? And that's cool, and you can learn a little bit about why this person might hate green or not. But realize that people can go off tangents, and again, you need to focus on what you're trying to learn. So before this session started, you should have some goals written down, like I need to learn about A, B, and C. Those are the things that interest me. And you will learn about other things, but you have to make sure if a person goes off tangent, give them a minute, give them 2 minutes maybe to let them just talk about what they need to talk about, but make sure you're bringing it back. And so that's where herd the cats comes in. And finally, again, along this process of low, medium to high, you still want to be iterating. Excuse me. What you want to do here, however, is iterate, but allow more time to get consensus from multiple people. So during the first round, during low fidelity, if 2 people tell you something and it's like you have completely no idea, go ahead and make that change and test it again. With the medium fidelity, wait for maybe 5 people to tell you something before you're ready to completely make a change in your prototype. And with this high fidelity, you're getting you should have been getting much more and more closer to your final design. So you really want to wait. Just because 3 people say something, that doesn't mean you need to stop the presses and rethink everything. You've been learning along the way. So you want to make sure, like, maybe it's 5 people that really kind of say all the same type of thing that impacts you to the point where you want to change, make some changes. However, because you're still prototyping and not necessarily building, you have the opportunity to iterate. So use that opportunity to come up with new sketches, update your prototypes, and continue to get feedback from there. All right.
Great. And yeah, it was interesting. I definitely, kind of learned a lot, like, heard some things that I heard before and got me thinking about like what to change in the high fidelity. Like one thing was mentioned by the user was, is this going to be like amateur or advanced? And I was thinking maybe there could be some icon to potentially test. Or how much time would elapse on average. So just sort of for next next iterations, the high fidelity, I'm going to want to kind of go in and sort of like test out some different sort of icons to represent that, and different examples of what's on the sort of high level browse versus the sort of in the actual detail. And it looks like I need to make that the button a little bit more clear on that. And one of the things that's the thing that's really interesting is like as you're going along the way, like in a tool like Proto.io, for example, like since you can kind of go from low to medium to high within the same environment. Here is that like at any point, like as you're doing it and you have some question, I'm like for example, like I didn't yet put in a login, for example. I wanted to sort of hold it out to kind of present as much information as possible, but I'm thinking, where could that be? Maybe it's at the point where on the results screen when the heart is tapped, to actually be able to save that. Maybe at that time a login is prompted. So that's one thing I might try to test on that sort of next iteration. And again, it's like any idea you can come up, you just like boom, you can just like change it and go and like make your change and then just simply update it and then test it again. So you can have this really fluid sort of almost kind of like near real time designing and testing sort of process as you iterate through the fidelity before it's starting to be coded. And you can get to the point where it feels pretty real and save a lot of time and make it really, really efficient. And so yeah, so with that said, I'd like to kind of open it up to questions that you have of any of us. So go ahead if you have any questions at this time. I don't see any at the moment. And so, so I guess we can, okay, I see. Hello, Bernundi. I hope you're pronouncing your name right. Let us know if you have a question. If not, at the moment, like if you wanted to be able to get in touch with any of us, I'll get to that in 1 second. And so one question here is, can you use external tools to create design assets and import in? Yeah, and so while you can do all of the design in Proto.io, and I have done that, you can, through our Photoshop and Sketch plugin, be able to import directly. So there's plugins there that you can sort of import artboards or individual assets, and then if you update them and import it again, it will update those assets. So you can use your own assets, or design it completely within the tool, or what I've kind of learned to do is some hybrid, and you realize what's best for each. You know, like for example, in Proto.io, there's all of the iOS components. The native iOS component libraries are here, and you can basically customize them. And so for regular like standard native components, it makes sense to sort of have them in the tool rather than using a flat asset from Sketch. Another question: do you recommend a minimum number of testers? Juan, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Excuse me. Apologize. I always have something in my throat when I'm doing a webinar, like the worst time. Excuse me. So, number of testers. You want to, throughout the process, right, from low, medium to high, you want to kind of adjust your number of testers. And specifically also, as I started to mention in each section, the number of testers that you get past really also matters, right? So if I get past the first 3 in my early prototypes, and this is just, you know, a rule of thumb number, if I get past the first 3, I think, and everyone kind of understands it, I'm doing pretty well. Like I think I have enough to start making some iterations to my medium level prototype. But as I mentioned, because every step of the process you want to let more and more people really provide feedback, and you're not going to really take anything to heart just because one person said it. In essence, you want to get more and more test participants as you go. So I'll give a rule of thumb. You could start with like 3 to 4 with a very low fidelity prototype. With medium, you know, you go up a little higher, 6 to 7, and then with a high fidelity, you know, definitely try to get to 10. And that really depends also on like your personas. If you are trying to build and design something for only one persona, then those numbers apply. As soon as you're building kind of something for at least 2 or 3 different personas, you have to multiply those numbers, right? You need to make sure you're seeing the same number of test participants per persona. So if I have 2 personas, for example, and I have a medium fidelity prototype, instead of 4 to 5, I want to do like 9 to 10, and meaning I get 5 of each persona. It really depends on, you know, on the way your organization is structured. Like some organizations really need 20 people before they consider anything to be helpful. That really depends on your organization. But one thing I do want to say is the leaner you could be in your research, right? The quicker you can make iterations to your prototypes, the stronger it is. So you don't need 20 people. You don't need 100 people. What you need is the right type of persona, the right type of test participant. If they are your target market, you have that value is really high. Now, with Validate, you can also do unmoderated testing, and so you can say, well, just give me like 20 people who are all, you know, aged 15 or 25 to 30, who are all male in California, and you can do that. And you want higher numbers there because those are not really like your very, very specific target market. Now, if those people owned bikes and kind of commuted, and then also on a train, and then also like to go on bike trails, like then the number can come down a lot because you are talking to the real target, and that's really what matters. So it's hard to give you a specific number. because there are a lot of variables there. But I hope that question was helpful.
Great. And another one is sort of like someone would like to see, Ashley would like to see kind of more of the moderator side of the product and the analytics for the tests themselves. And so what type of like, I guess, analytics, if you can maybe talk to the Validate.ly's product a bit on that.
Yeah, sure, of course. Okay, so I'll have to talk to it mostly. Is Todd not logged in to Validate.ly right now? But in short, with the moderated experiences that we just saw, where we're having a live session, there are no real analytics. These are video recordings of the session. However, on my end as a moderator in that sample session, I'm able to take notes in Validate.ly, and I'm also able to flag moments in time. So some things that we hear some of our users do is if there are like really critical things that someone said, other than just take a simple note and maybe quote it, they'll also like add multiple flags, right? So like if you decide like if I add 5 flags at this moment, that tells me this is critically important, and if I only put one flag at some other moment, like I should probably not pay as much attention. It's interesting, I should go look at it again, but it's not necessarily anywhere near as important as like the time I hit five flags. So you can get that across all your participants. That as I also just mentioned, that you can do unmoderated testing with your own users or with a Validate.ly panel. And for those, there's a few more analytics there. So very soon you'll be able to. Right now you can come up with the average times to complete. So if you've ever run an unmoderated test, you set up multiple tasks. For each task, we just calculate the amount of time that each one took, so you get at least an average time to complete those tasks. And then very soon you'll also be able to add in a pass or fail flag to a video recording, and very soon after that as well for moderated. So if after task 1 I watch the video, right in my notes section I'll be able to type in, I'd be able to say, well, this person passed, this person failed, and then I'll have access to that at a study level. And so I have my 10 participants I saw, I'll see how many passed or failed right within Validate.ly without having to download an Excel file and type in pass or failed and then have to export that somewhere else. So those are really the analytics that we provide for unmoderated and kind of for qualitative moderated testing as well. Hope that helps.
And also there was a question on, can users do remote testing in the browser without downloading the app? Have you tried it before?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. Can users do remote testing in a mobile browser without downloading the app?
So I'm not sure what the app is. Let's say it's, I'll give 2 answers.
I guess the Validate.ly app itself.
Oh, sure.
So just using, I guess, mobile Safari versus having to download an app in order to do the mobile testing.
No, so with Validate.ly, the only way to push a URL such as the Proto.io URL is to, and of course to record it, is to use the Validate.ly app. That being said, we know, especially early on in the process, during the low fidelity and early design phases, you want to get this in front of more people and more of a kind of casual conversational piece. So with Proto.io and many prototyping tools, there's a URL, you can open it in any browser, and then you go to a coffee shop or you go down the hall in your office and maybe talk to people who are not on your team, and you get some fresh eyes that way. And so you can use most of the prototyping tools in that way without downloading the Validate.ly mobile app. However, as soon as you want to record the session, and of course take notes as I was doing earlier, the test participant does need to be in the app. That way we can record not only what's happening on screen, but you also notice in the bottom right corner we were capturing the test participant's face, and that really helps. That really helps you understand, how they're feeling, right? So they could be saying one thing, but they can be saying a really amazingly happy, wow, this is the best app ever, and then you look it on their face and like they're confused, right? Their eyebrows are they're squinting or they can't read something. Like there's always that element of body language and what's happening on someone's face to really help. So in short, you can use any prototyping tool on any browser you want. The value Validately brings is to record that session to share with any of your teammates, anyone in the company, and also capture that facial part and take notes while you're going.
Yeah, and also with Proto.io, I mean, when you share the link here, so in addition to the actual user testing link specifically for Validately, just taking the snapshot link, it can just be viewed right in the browser itself. As well, just anywhere on the web, and also in mobile Safari if you want to just sort of add to home screen. And so you wouldn't need the Proto.io app either necessarily if you wanted to just sort of just simply view the prototype itself. Okay, and is there Validately remote testing for desktop web apps?
Yes. That's, I think, a pretty easy. I just want to make it simple. Yes. Go to validately.com and check it out. We offer moderated for desktop, mobile, and on Android we offer native app testing. So if your app is already in the Play Store, you can also run a moderated session with that as well. So please, feel free to go check out validately.com and it's there now. Yeah, that's it.
And someone was asking, the app that we will be testing are for patients with a specific medical diagnosis. Would the video through Validately be protecting their confidentiality?
That's a great question. So every organization is different. You need to make sure that you have the kind of terms and conditions in place for that. Validately just records whatever's on the screen. It only captures their name and email. There are no other kind of PII, personally identifiable information, that we capture. When you do share these videos, no one can see any more than what I just described. So it really depends on your organization. We do know that some, especially in other countries, in Europe, for example, it's where your data is stored. It's really a safety privacy thing. So it really depends on your organization. Also, just realize that when you do any sort of moderated test, the first few minutes of that session are a contract that you're kind of verbally signing with the test participant. You want to let them know everything that's going to happen. You want to let them know that you're recording, that it's being stored somewhere. And if that person is not okay with that, you have to feel free to end the session there and not continue. One thing we want to do is make sure that our test participants feel comfortable. And at any moment, if they're not comfortable in that process, you should take the upper hand, I guess, or that's not the right word, but you should consider them greatly and realize, what, this is not going to be helpful to me, and it might be impactful in a bad way to them. So you just end the session early and move on to your next one.
Another question: can I test accessibility with Validately?
Not out of the box. It's a good question. Whatever a website can do for accessibility, meaning if your website is accessible in Chrome or Firefox, for example, it's very similar to the kind of the web perspective that we present in Validately. So if your website is accessible and you can test it, just using a regular browser, then the answer is yes. However, there is no additional functionality that Validately has for accessibility exactly.
Okay, let us know if we haven't answered your question, or if anyone has another question. In the meantime, if you want to reach us, you can reach me on Twitter at Todd Siegel. So if you have any comments on the webinar itself, or you want to email me, I'm Todd at Proto.io, and Juan is Lopez Juan R, and Juan at validately.com.
Yeah, great. So, actually, I do have one additional question that just came in. For each of the prototype phases, should you be using the same users during each phase? This, unfortunately, the answer is it depends. Generally, you want new people, like at all times, you want fresh eyes. But let's say you have a pretty big customer list already. And for example, like I was doing some research this morning with a certain set of customers at a very early like prototype stage. Nothing's being built yet, just some early ideas. It makes a lot of sense for you to decide, well, I'm going to get some people who've seen this before, right? Because it's kind of like a natural progression. Like, okay, well, I saw what it used to look like. Now I see they've taken some more feedback and refined it a bit, and now it's a little closer in. So you want to see how people react, like similar people react to the progression. But there's a really good case for always getting brand new people, right? People who've never seen it, have no context, and really understanding their view as well. So it's a little bit of both. You definitely want to be careful of only using the same person over and over again, or the same group of people. But there is value there as well. So you have to find the balance, and it really depends on your customer. You know, if you have again, a pretty big customer list, it's really crucial that you talk to them and use them as a proxy or as participants. If you don't have a customer list, you know, it's early on in your company's existence or your app existence, try to get newer people, because that gets you a larger perspective.
Okay, great. Let us know if you have any more questions. I think that is it. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Again, my name is Todd Siegel, and that was Juan Lopez. And yeah, it was a great session here on remote moderated testing and reporting. Juan, do you have anything else you'd like to add at this time before we end the webinar?
No, thank you so much for everyone for attending. Great set of questions at the end there. Again, we hope you saw value in this. I know I personally will say it was just great to work with you, Todd, and
You too.
yeah. Thanks so much, everyone.